Hi, it's Carolyn Elephant on MyShingle.com and welcome to day 22 of your law practice. So today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about a book that I finished over the weekend. It's called Company of One by Paul Jarvis, and the tagline is, Why Staying Small is the Next Big Thing for Business. One of the reasons why I like this book so much and why I've been waiting for it for such a long time is because Jarvis's advice goes against conventional wisdom. And if you know me, you know that I am not a fan of the group speak. So essentially what Jarvis's premise is that in order for companies to thrive, they don't necessarily have to scale and get bigger. They can also grow by becoming better. And the reason that advice is so important for law firms is for a couple of reasons. First of all, as most of you know, lawyers are precluded for taking outside investment. And so that option of getting bigger through venture capital doesn't exist for attorneys. But the second reason why Jarvis's advice is important is because lawyers feel so much pressure to expand. If you talk to lawyers who are starting out, they're always looking forward to when they can bring on their next associate and their next paralegal, how they can grow their staff, when they can get a bigger office. And those are great ambitions to have. And if that's what you want for yourself, by all means, go for it. But what lawyers don't realize is that all of those amenities come with a cost. And when you grow out your firm and have expensive space and have expensive staff, you've got to generate more business to feed the beast. And that's something that can put pressure on your firm. And in fact, it does put pressure on many attorneys. And that's why so many struggle, is because they're laboring under the burden of excessive overhead. Now, you've probably seen a lot of these self-help programs online that talk about seven-figure practices, and you may dream of having something like that. But the bottom line is that many of those seven-figure practices are carrying six figures in revenue, and you need to ask yourself whether that's what you want. And Paul Jarvis's book makes the case for the fact that you don't necessarily have to have that in order to be successful. And I think that's one of the first takeaways, is that you don't have to spend tons of money in order to generate a lot of money. By offering higher quality services and by employing automation and technology and judicious use of freelancers and part-time workers, you can also generate the same amount of revenue. And so I think that's one thing that lawyers need to think about when they get started. Now, the second thing lawyers may wonder about in terms of staying small is, well, I want to have an influence on the law. I want to leave a legacy. I want the work that I do to touch a lot of people and have tons of meaning. Can I do that if I stay small? And the answer is unequivocally yes, because as Jarvis points out, when you have a company of one, it's not just limited to the work that you do. You can figure out ways to make yourself available in other formats. So for example, Paul Jarvis explains in the book that he doesn't like to make public presentations. He does a lot of his work online, and yet his influence is expansive because it's multiplied. Instead of just going out and speaking at many individual events or consulting with lots of individual companies, he has online webinars and trainings available, and so that leverages his time. So as an attorney, you want to ask yourself if you want to have influence. You can certainly handle cases and litigate cases that are important, get involved in bar associations or legislative activities to change the law, but there are also things that you can do to give yourself a voice in the online world. You can magnify the scope of your influence through a blog or through online trainings where you can make your teachings available to other attorneys who can also adopt the message that you have. So that's the second point, is that even though you stay small, you can have a big, powerful voice in the world. Now, the third thing lawyers wonder about, of course, is exit strategy. Now, if you can scale your practice, or if you can scale a company and sell it to somebody else, that's your exit strategy. But keep in mind, that doesn't always happen. There are a lot of companies that scale that are lucky to get out with the shirts on their back. So what can you do if you're a company of one and where your influence revolves largely on the cult of you and your personality and the personal relationships that you have? Well, one of your exit strategies can be to make as much money as you can while you're working so that you can invest it, and save it, and so that when you retire or leave your business, even if you can't sell any of it to anybody else, you've still earned enough and gotten enough of a return to make it worthwhile. And so that's one approach that Jarvis talks about, is prudent money management while you're making the money. Now the second thing is just because you're a company of one, again, it doesn't mean that you don't have products or offerings that you can make available to others. You still may have investments in website presence, in products you've created. Those also have value that can continue to repay even after you've left the practice of law. And so that's another potential exit strategy. The other thing to keep in mind is that even though in theory the idea of selling a firm to somebody or transitioning it sounds great in theory, in practice, many lawyers have not had as much success with selling firms as you might expect. The lawyers who have the most success are those who incorporate a younger attorney into the fold and transition the firm that way. And that's something that's still feasible when you have a small practice. And in fact, even more so, it's something even easier to do than if you've got a large, expansive practice where somebody may not want to take over an enterprise that's that large. So even staying small is something that, even if you're concerned about what your exit strategy is, staying small does not necessarily mean that you're just going to walk away from the business you have and take nothing with you. You can still take your investment. Finally, Company of One really reinforces this idea that you can be an entrepreneur and you can still be small. You can have a voice, you can be successful, you can be that 1 in a million attorney or that 1 in a million person who stands out in their industry. You don't have to be a Microsoft or an Apple or a Google, but to have influence and to be successful. And you might have a lot less stress in your life if you take this approach. For those of you starting out, you're probably at a crossroads. You may not know whether you want to grow or whether you want to stay small. And a lot of the voices and all of the information you're hearing online is telling you to grow as fast as you can. If that's the case, I always think it's important to look at the opposite view. And for you, most of all, I would recommend Company of One to see what benefits there are from staying small as a law firm. This is Carolyn Elephant of MyShingle.com. Come back tomorrow for day 23 of your law practice.